breathing a collective sigh of relief now that Greta Thunberg is safe after having been kidnapped in international waters by Israel, given a pastrami sandwich wrapped in a plastic bag and a plastic bottle of water. If that's not genocide, I don't know what is. But yeah, Greta, of course, we kind of know a bit of the story. She and her fellow travelers were taken to a room. They were shown the video of the horrors on October 7th, refused to watch it, and were allowed not to for some reason. They were given the opportunity to sign deportation papers accepting a ban from Israel for 100 years. Some of them accepted, others went to prison. Israel, the reason we know about the pastrami sandwich and so on, it was because that was for Israel, that was the victory. Is showing a picture of Greta at the airport with Israeli flags behind her. Whereas what we are actually getting is these propagandists against the existence of the Jewish state, going back and telling a story of victimhood for themselves, and of course, the story that we continue to hear about victimhood of the Palestinians in Gaza in the war that they started and refused to end. Welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Michael Kaufman, and for the first time on the show, Stuart Margolis. Stuart, I'm going to go to you first. We had some issues with the audio, but hopefully those are fixed. And if not, speak up and we will.
Okay.
Of course.
I'm told I have a very loud voice in general, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear, and the audience will let us know if they can't.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I find this whole story just so incredibly frustrating. In some ways, I think it was deliberately designed to be a no-win situation for Israel, and unfortunately, I think that that's what has happened. Um, Despite the pastrami sandwiches in the water, I don't think that most of the world is being turned to Israel's side from this. I don't know that they're necessarily being turned against Israel. I think uh, probably most people have already chosen sides long ago. Um, but it's just so frustrating to me because if Israel had conducted this whole war aggressively from the start, this would all be ancient history. And the fact that we're still dealing with it is just frustrating and unnecessary. And yet, this is the world we live in. We're constantly dealing with issues that should not have been issues if they were remotely dealt with as they should have been.
Yeah, Michael, not only is Israel not dealing aggressively with the Palestinians in the war, but with this boat, I mean, besides letting them all, giving them free flights to Paris for all I can tell, that's what you get from for doing this. They also said they will pass along the so-called humanitarian aid. Uh, yeah. Oh, and yeah, it was mostly photo ops, as far as I can tell. There's also the photo op in the airplane, which, as far as I haven't flown El Al in decades. That looks like premium economy to me, or it's very nice economy seats. Yeah, she was next to the toilet, but people who pay for tickets end up sitting next to the toilet. I don't know, Michael. I didn't like any of this except the fact that they didn't let them in, which I wasn't sure was going to happen.
Yeah, look, I think Israel and Jews in general, I mean, I don't think this is just Israeli. Jews seem to think that if we just do one more nice thing or behave civilized or or act in a, we're above it all because we just have to behave better. And I've used the analogy before, you walk into a lion's den and you talk to the lion and it's all good until the lion gets hungry and then they just open their mouth and kill you. And this is the entire way Israel has done the press about the war, apologizing at every stage, saying, "Well, we've done yeah, but we've done better. We've sent in 12,000 meals today in the last hour, and they brought enough for three people because they ate most of it on the way." This was an act. I mean, in a normal situation, and I'm sure if somebody came up to a Russian fleet or a Chinese fleet or a North Korean fleet with a boat and started to try to break the blockade, the boat would probably have blown out of the water, and at least the people would have been taken into custody and sent to some prison and some dungeon and tortured for a long time, probably never to be heard from again. But of course, Israel is above all that because they don't do stuff like that because we're good people and we have our own set of rules. The fact that someone publicized coming in to a naval blockade, which has been in place, frankly, was in place before the war because you had to blockade weapons from Gaza. You could let them in through Egypt. Egypt let them in through Egypt, but you block the naval blockade. That's okay. This is all okay. And we're going to play along. As Stuart said, it was a no-win situation because we just behave as if it's all very civilized, except that our kids are getting killed and our people are being terrorized and missiles are flying and missiles are still coming from Gaza. It's appalling. They just don't learn. They being Israel, and I live there half the time. You're hearing from me today from Boston, but it's absurd.
Yeah, and by the way, that example of trying to break the Russian blockade, we're never going to see that because none of these people would ever. First of all, Russia is the aggressor and they're savages. So if any, the more consistent among these people who support the Palestinians are also pro-Russia, but they would never do that. They would never, like go to war against a country that is actually the kind of country they're pretending Israel is, and they would definitely never refuse to be deported from such a country and pick prison instead. That you only do that when it's the kind of country you feel comfortable enough doing that in. And yeah, in a sense, it's sad that Israel doesn't realize that it is at a state of actual war, in the same way that Ukraine is in a state of war, for example. But it's clearer when you're against an enemy that's stronger than you. But Israel seems to buy into much of what its enemies say, and then act somehow within boundaries that it imagines are okay with, or its enemies might be okay with. Okay, we have a video from Greta, but let's go around one more time. Stuart, any thoughts on any of that?
I I was struck by how performative the whole venture was. This was never about delivering aid. I mean, the amount of aid that was on that boat was, ridiculously small. It was always a publicity stunt. It was always a performance, and yet it probably works for a lot of people. They don't. They're not savvy enough to recognize it, which makes me sad. But yeah, this and the fact that Greta, uh, she, I don't think she's given any deep thought to this issue. She, refuses to look at the videos. She's just mindlessly repeating the propaganda. Um, and yet I'm sure that it works. It affects people.
It affects people who want to let it affect them. I think that's
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's certainly not affecting me or people that understand what Israel is actually going through and actually doing. But the vast majority of people probably don't even give this issue very much thought, and so they see this little soundbite on the news, and their sympathy doesn't go very deep, but they have sympathy for Greta or they have sympathy for the Gazans. And I see this all the time. People that have given no thought, have no understanding of the history of the region, but they're like, oh, but children are suffering, and that's about as deep as it goes. And this feeds into that kind of person that is not giving this any serious thought. They're just looking at the little sound bites. They're looking at pictures of suffering children, and that's it.
yeah, Michael.
Well, it's obviously they're looking selectively at suffering children because there's a lot more suffering children in a lot of places in the world.
Oh, of course, of course.
Obviously, and you know that. I'm just saying. I
Yeah.
mean, The fact that this woman, she's like one of these other characters that we talk about on the show. It boggles the mind that people are that stupid to follow. Frankly, she's a young idiot who's never contributed anything good in the world. Somebody who cared about anything would wonder, why are you were so great, you were so perfect that you wouldn't fly there because of your carbon footprint. But unless she used wind power only, this whole thing obviously had a carbon footprint. And of course she didn't.
Right.
The, I mean, it's the whole thing is not only is it theater, but it's truly for morons. I mean, this is like daytime television in the US, soap opera kind of crap that the idiots out there unfortunately start to believe some of this stuff. I mean, she was a climate activist, and now she's a the most despicable people on the planet activist. And it almost always has to be Jewish because there's plenty of other countries you could go worry about. Go worry about the fact that 30% of people or more in North Korea are starving to death, actually starving to death.
Right.
And let's talk about those people. Or if you say no in North Korea, you're dead. You're not, and your family's dead. There's no real. I mean, it really it is shocking. What's unfortunately, and I think I don't know if we want to bring it up too much today, but conflated in this whole thing is this notion of why is Israel not fighting this war? And why are they so bent on all this kind of apologist crap, which it's a when did I stop beating my wife question. And there's no good answer to that because it implies that you're beating your wife whether you stopped or didn't. Um, and part of it is this real problem in Israel that we those of us that live there, we don't understand why Israel isn't fighting the war. We didn't understand it with Biden. We could explain that Joe Biden was tying hands behind our back. Every day that passes since Trump said, give them hell, let hell rain down on them, that passes, that Israel continues to not fight this war, and all this crap going on in Israel about calling up more reserves and the screaming, and now the fights over the Haredim and whether they have to serve and all this stuff. It, it all seems to come back to the fact that our leadership, Netanyahu, doesn't want to fight the war to win. He just wants to prolong it. Every day we hear about dozens of terrorist sites that have been eliminated. You know how many, if you total up the number of terrorist sites in Gaza, it's probably correct. But what does it mean if week after week we hear about dozens of terrorist sites eliminated? The issue of aid distribution was completely solved. I mean, really, folks, if you think about finally when they decided to get the UN out of this, and what is Greta thing? Her timing is bad because at least when the UN was in there and it was completely corrupt and Hamas was getting everything, which is what was happening, of course, under UNRWA, since UNRWA is a division of Hamas. Anybody who studied this knows it. She might have had something to say. She had, like you guys said, there was such a joke of an amount. It's like literally, pardon the term, pissing in the ocean was the amount of food aid that she brought in there. It's complete theater and theatrics, and it is disgusting that the Israeli taxpayers have had to foot the bill to not only protect this idiot woman, but to send her back on a flight. They frankly should have put her back on a boat and threatened her that if that boat doesn't get out of these waters, and we don't care if it's international, we're coming after you. And we all know that this could have been taken care of quietly. We all know that. It
Yeah.
wasn't. The Israelis chose to play into this entire fiasco.
Yeah, I mean, you say the timing was bad. I think you're being generous to Greta. I think the timing was intentional and was perfect. The aid before was going to the people the Gretas of the world wanted to go to, which is Hamas, and it was controlled by them. Now, the cause of Palestinianism is weakened when, again, I'm against giving aid to Gazans, period. But the current mechanism is one that really is very, very difficult for Hamas, and this is why the timing was perfect. As for North Korea, I'm sure that is where the next flotilla is going. No, I mean, look, North Korea is why would they do something? They're much more aligned with Greta's values than any other country. I think Alex Epstein often shares this, right? The
Yeah,
picture
their
of them.
carbon footprint is very low.
Yeah, yeah, that's a Greta dream, North Korea. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Jonathan says Israel is considered the new big oil. Nothing too innovative, or to hate, or for Greta, I guess. I'm not sure I fully understood that or conveyed that well, but I appreciate the super chat anyway. And thank you for another super chat and another super chat, Jonathan, who says no aid for the enemy. Yeah, that would be a good start to a policy of how to fight a war. But yeah, now that Greta is obviously, distraught and everything, let's hear what she had to say when she landed in Paris.
How did the Israelis treat you? We saw them giving out sandwiches on their social media. How did they? How did
Yeah, they probably have posted lots of PR stunt videos. As I said, I have not seen anything, but they did an illegal act by kidnapping us on international waters and against our will, bringing us to Israel, keeping us in the bottom of the boat, not letting us getting out, and so
Okay,
on.
let's pause there. Yeah, look, again, the use of the word kidnap is intentional and it's absolutely despicable. And uh, doing an illegal act against our will. You came to a war zone, chose to take part in the war, essentially. Yeah, it is it is your will. But yeah, what is against your will is the existence of the state of Israel. That is the problem you have there. Stuart.
I I just, as a former English major, I think it's hilarious that she has to say kidnapped against her will. Um, who gets kidnapped, with their, I mean, that just is nonsensical. But yeah, it's, again, it's all performance. And I don't think Israel necessarily handled it very well, but I also think it was designed to, there really was, I don't know that there was like a win situation for Israel in this, especially given the bias that the media tends to have. I just don't know that there was a way this was going to go well for Israel, and I think that was very much in the design.
Yeah, and Michael, even with them being, brought to Ashdod, being taken into a room to watch the video, and then when they didn't want to, they didn't have to, and then being given the option, like it still got condemnations from Spain, from France, a demand for immediate release of their citizens, and so on. Yeah, so Israel couldn't win this in the PR sense, but still did everything it thought it could and should in order to win that. Yeah, Michael, how do you judge their performance?
Look, I suspect that there are tens, if not hundreds, of PR agents, at least in the US, where we specialize in dressing up the most fatuous, vacant stuff and pretending it has substance. I mean, we're good at that. We're good at real stuff here too. Don't get me wrong, where I honestly think America's the best country, but we're really good at PR. We are super good at, and politicians are getting better and better. I mean, you got Gavin Newsom getting up there while the flames are throwing, around LA, and we're having a third world country in LA again, claiming that Trump shouldn't have sent in because everything was under control, and then a police cruiser blows up. That's how good our PR is here, and of course, all his Democrats cheer him, and so on. There's no question that there are better PR people out there that could have figured out how to handle this. The second thing is that the notion that France and Spain, I think if I had a brain from Israel, I would get up there and I would say, France and Spain are demanding the return of their citizens. When did France and Spain and America even demand, and the UK and Australia demand the return of the hostages? Because I suspect that there is a lot more demand for the return of these idiot volunteers than there was for the people that Hamas took. I don't recall France and Spain getting up screaming that dual citizens were taken hostage in Gaza and tortured and incarcerated against their will. And I don't recall any of that. I don't hear Macron saying that dual French citizens. I didn't hear Biden saying we're not going to tolerate American Israeli citizens. We were all excited when a dead body of an American Israeli citizen got returned. It's ridiculous. But the inability of Israel to capitalize on this stuff. Let Spain. I mean, Spain and the UK and Australia and Canada have condemned, elected people. I don't like those people that they condemned in Israel. They're busy sanctioning these people. They want to set up a Palestinian state as a reward for the terrorism. And they want to pretend that the Palestinian Authority is not as bad as Hamas. And why are we at all surprised that they demanded all this theater? But again, why does Israel have to address that question when they don't address the underlying question? So I'm not smart enough on this, and I don't want to spend my life figuring out how best to get under people's skin and come up with messaging. But man, there are people that do this for a living, and they're really good at it. And Israel should just think about hiring one or two of them instead of the complete duds that they have advising them right now.
Yeah, by the way, you ask where do they mention the hostages? Usually it's like paragraph seven of like half a sentence in paragraph seven of a
Yeah,
long statement. So they throw it in there. But as a side note,
afterthought. Yeah,
it was even in that statement by the prime ministers of the UK and Canada and the president of France a few weeks ago that Hamas issued a thank you note for.
yes,
So yeah, it's mentioned, but the way it's mentioned is more insulting than if it wasn't mentioned at all.
exactly.
Yeah, and
It'd be
and
insulting to citizens of all those countries. If I really thought the U.S. didn't give a darn about me traveling, I would never leave the U.S. Really, if I thought that at any moment it wouldn't matter to a foreign government if they or one of the illegal groups inside their country took me hostage, then I would not leave. I wouldn't feel comfortable leaving the US. I mean, part of what our governments are supposed to do is extend our protection beyond the borders. An American citizen used to mean something. Under Biden, it meant nothing. Under Trump, we'd all like to believe it means something more, but we haven't really seen. We've heard a lot of words, but we haven't really seen much. Clearly, in France, the UK, Canada, and Australia, it means zero.
uh, okay, before we continue with the video, Stuart, any advice for Israel on PR? What can they do? What can they do better? I mean, they
Well, I think
yeah.
it's not primarily a PR issue. I mean, I think their PR certainly could be better, but really their leadership just needs to be better. They need to actually have a strategy, and it's not clear that they do, or if this is their strategy, it's pretty weak. Um, like I said, I mean, I just get incredibly frustrated because right after October 7th, they really had the world's sympathy. And if they had gone in strongly and decisively and just wiped out Hamas at that point, yeah, there would have been some outcry, but it would have all been in the context of October 7th. And I think the world would have gotten over it pretty quickly. But by doing it this way, they've allowed what always happens, which, the anti Semitism creeps in, and just larger than even anti-Semitism, I think the bias against strong countries, strong people. It's the weak must be virtuous and the strong must be bad. That's why they're strong, because they're not good. It's this complete inversion of morality, but by not acting decisively, Israel really allowed that to come to the fore. And so now they're suffering for it. And I don't know that there's any easy cure at this point.
Yeah, and Michael, I don't remember if it was you or Stuart who mentioned selectively looking at at children suffering, and they're selective even in the way that they look at children in Gaza because it is horrible to think of children in war anywhere and what they must be going through. Uh, which is all the more reason you need to hate the people who are putting children in that situation, which is the people who launched the war, and the people who choose to continue it and choose to hide behind their own children. So, yeah, to what extent do you think, Michael, the Gretas of the world are you know people I still see people on social media say, "Oh, why are you attacking a child?" And you have to say, "Look, she's 22 years old. she's been a legal adult for years. You know, she may look like a child, but she's not. And yeah, to what extent do people who are activists and advocates of the Palestinians at that age understand what they're actually advocating for, and that they are on the side of the killers of children?
No, she understands this, and if she doesn't understand, it's her fault. But she's an adult, and it's time to stop apologizing for stupid adults. This is one of the most onerous things that we do, and it is, as Stuart alluded to, it's based in this altruistic notion and this notion that people that are stupid and weak and failures deserve some kind of protection and extra time and more optionality and support and just there's a saying, and I know it's a blunt saying, but I'm going to say it. You can't teach a pig to sing. It makes you look stupid, and it annoys the pig. And the problem with Greta is that she's an idiot, and she's always been an idiot, and she will always be an idiot. That anybody supports this woman. I mean, I don't know exactly, and I don't. Maybe you guys know who funded this ridiculous masquerade, where the money's coming from, and then her ridiculous comment, which we'll get to later, that she had no idea that some of the people traveling with her are pro-terrorist. She's pro-terrorist. She's always been pro-terrorist. The last thing I would say is that if you think she's a child, why are we making news about a child? Really, let her go. Let her go back to her grade school project and put on a play. But she makes news and she's trying to make policy. She tried to shut down the entire oil industry. She believes that we all should have frozen to death. She does believe that. That's what her climate policy was. You should all freeze to death during the winter so that we don't pollute the planet. And it just continues. And that didn't stick. And the fact that the world hasn't ended, as many of the climate catastrophists believe, she has to move on. And this is the latest one. The latest one is that kids that are being held in front of a terrorist in order to protect the terrorist, your job is to let the terrorist gun you down because there's a kid in front of them. The second thing is those kids, a lot of them are already holding guns. We have the pictures. And they're certainly being taught to hate Jews. My view is age is not an excuse for being a terrorist or being associated with a terrorist. Anybody pulls a gun on me, I or the government that represents me should blow that person away and ask questions later.
Well, I agree with the last part of that, but as I always say, look, if a child is innocent, even if he has a gun, in the sense that whoever is guilty there is the person who put the gun in his hands. But yeah, of course, you should defend yourself in that situation. The idea that because the adult chose not to shoot at you and instead is giving that gun to the child, the idea that that means you should accept death is ridiculous, but that is basically what's being demanded of Israel. Um, okay,
Um,
let's listen. Yeah, Stuart.
Sorry, I'd like to push back on one thing a little bit. I don't think that Greta is stupid. In terms, I'm sure if she's had IQ tests, I don't think she's a low IQ person, as Trump might say. I think the corruption is ideological and moral. I don't think it's a matter of intelligence. It's a small distinction, but I think, to call her stupid when she's not just sounds like you're throwing gratuitous insults. And I don't think it's getting to the core of her issue.
It's actually letting her off the hook in a
Letting
sense.
her off the hook,
No, that's a
exactly.
fair point. I will change that. I think that's right. I think she's evil. And I think she's not stupid. You're right. When I said stupid, I mostly mean that anyone with her philosophy is basically enabling killers who ultimately will kill her. And
Right. I mean, in that larger sense, it's stupid, but yeah, but it's really a moral issue, not
that's a
an
very,
intellectual
very
issue.
good point. I stand corrected. Thanks. Or I sit corrected.
And according to the prevalent morality in the West, she has the moral high ground. Let's listen to her preach a little bit more there in the airport in Paris.
Getting out and so on. But that is not the real story here. The real story is that there is a genocide going on in Gaza and a systematic starvation following the siege and blockade now, which is leading to food, medicine, water that are desperately needed to get into Gaza is prevented from doing so. But of course, there are many attempts like this mission, both by sea and land, to break that siege and open up a humanitarian corridor.
All right. I don't know why we didn't see her eyes in that, but we can do without. Yeah, I don't know. Look, she ticked all the boxes, genocide, starvation, all the things that need to be repeated a lot because maybe somebody hasn't heard it said enough to accept it as truth. But yeah, she doesn't say anything of actual substance, and nobody ever challenges her. Nobody says, "Can you define genocide?" What do you think of this? The fact that they're now giving aid through a non-Hamas entity. None of these questions are asked, and nobody ever asks. We talk about we go through Pierce Morgan videos from time to time, and he always interrupts pro-Israel speakers, but it is getting worse. I mean, we saw with Natasha Hausdorff a 3-minute clip where he doesn't let her finish a single sentence, and none of these anti-Israel propagandists are ever asked tough questions. Those were questions of like, how are you? Did you survive? Was it, how bad was it, being kidnapped by the Zionist entity? Yeah, Stuart, and again, look, we're kind of counting on the media to tell us what's going on. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, unfortunately, and this is not just with Israel. I mean, I think journalism in general has declined to such an extent. Um, well, we live in a post-truth era. I mean, I know Michael has a much more favorable opinion of Trump than I do, but I think Trump, more than anyone, has fostered this idea that if you just blast a message over and over and refuse to back down, that somehow that becomes the reality. And we see that with Israel. We see that with so many things that the facts don't matter, truth doesn't matter. It's all about emotions and getting shouting down your opposition and gathering your tribe and rallying your tribe around your preferred set of facts. It's very discouraging, but it's not just Israel.
yeah. And Michael, it doesn't look like it's getting better on any count because if the right does it, the left isn't going to say, "Oh, you know what? We're gonna be pro-truth," and if the left does it, the right, they both double down on each other's war on truth.
Yeah, look, I have and I've fought I've fought a lot with the Ayn Rand Institute about this, and I continue to do so. I don't like I actually say I'm very disappointed in Trump. I think a lot of the things he promised and his a lot of his current stances, both domestic with this big bill, which I would hardly call beautiful, which will raise the debt considerably, and his lack of ability to do anything with Iran. Never mind leaving Israel to the Houthis, and it's my family is running to missile shelters still 2, 3, 4 times a week. Every time the Houthi idiots send a missile, and Israel has a pathetic, semi-proportional response and takes out a small sector of a port because God forbid, and announces it too, so we don't hurt anybody because you would never want to do that. And we have hysteria throughout central Israel. I think he's done a terrible job. The thing I differ about, and I agree with you, neither side is telling the truth. I mean, yeah, like I said earlier, you got Gavin Newsom standing up there as if everything's fine in LA, and cars are burning, cars are Molotov cocktails are being thrown, and the guy is, while this is going on, is saying everything's fine. Why do we need to send National Guard and now Marines there? And it still goes on, and people are being looted, and so on. It's absurd. That said, when you just real quick, the problem I have is that when you have two-party system and both parties are completely broken, I would say right now the Democratic Party is much more broken than the Republican, but they're both bad. And there's nobody interested in the truth at all. Then you have to pick the worst of either, because pretending that you can bury your head in the sand, this is where I differ from a lot of the philosophers, is we can't just not vote, because we could very well have ended up with Harris. And if people think things are tough or difficult or frustrated under Trump, can you imagine Harris? She would say she studied the map. And she agrees with Greta that was international waters and Israel had no business taking her out, or some other inane, stupid Kamala Harris kind of a thing. So I just clarify my position. I'm not really in favor of Donald Trump, but I'm much more in favor of him than I would have been for the Democrats. As a guy who has to deal in medicine, especially in late stage cancer patients and so on, and in science where we do have truth, whether you believe it or not or say it or not, at the end of the day, as Jeff Bezos said, reality always wins. And to the extent when you're honest and truthful and you bring good things forward and invent new drugs and everything and do good medicine and science, it helps people. When you lie or cover things over, it's a disaster and a failure. And nature is our judge, not whether, CNN typed out some baloney. Last point I'll make is, Stuart, I completely agree with you. I mean, the press, especially the legacy media, what do they think is going to be the end game here? That only a few percentage of the population believes anything they say? Because they have completely lost credibility. The fact that anybody still watches most of these channels and listens to these flakes, especially after the Biden cover-up, is shocking.
Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Stuart, I know you're in California and you have maybe different views. Do you want to? And at some point, I think we will have to actually talk about what's going on in California. In part, we don't do that because if it's me on a show, I don't really know that much of. I mean, I see some of it, but yeah. Do you want
Um, yeah, so I'm no longer in California. I live in Oregon now, but my home was California for most of my life, and friends and family are still there. So I definitely do want to push back. Again, the media is covering, the cars that blow up. Most of the city is perfectly peaceful, perfectly fine. LA is not burning down. LA was never going to be burning down. LA police, for all their flaws, are skilled at handling these kinds of group situations. I do not think it was necessary to call in the National Guard, and certainly calling in the Marines is ridiculous. The Marines are trained to kill people. They're not trained to crowd control. You're just asking for a terrible, terrible situation, and for no need. The police can handle it. The police, I think, were handling it. And if they needed help, it's up to the governor to call in the National Guard. That's not the role of the president. I think this overreach is very, very dangerous. And aside from the fact, I have a Substack. I'm going to be publishing an article about this. I think Trump provoked this. I think this was deliberate on his part. We've been deporting millions of people for decades without sending in, masked gunmen to, arrest people for misdemeanor charges at their place of work. I mean, it's ridiculous. This was obviously provocative. Again, it was performative. It's to feed his base, to get everybody excited and riled up. And specifically, I think he knew that there would be pushback and that it would escalate, and that would give him the opportunity to make this kind of military power grab. I disagree with you also. I think Harris would have been vastly superior. She would have been terrible. No doubt she would have been terrible, but she would have been terrible in the same way that Biden was terrible and Obama was terrible. Not in that, I mean, Trump is threatening to use overwhelming force for protesters at his military parade, which should never be happening in the first place. But, in America, we have the freedom to assemble. And he doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about First Amendment. He doesn't care about due process. He is as anti-American as any president has ever been, in my opinion. I think it's a disaster.
It
But that
sounds,
really is another thing, another show.
yeah, it does sound like a conversation. By the way, this show on Friday, I believe, I don't know if it's confirmed, Daniel can tell us, but I believe we have a debate on Friday on this show uh,
Oh,
uh, but it's on a different topic. It's the deportation versus denazification of Gazans. Daniel, you can tell me if that's confirmed or not. But yeah, it looks like yeah, we will have more topics to debate. One thing we can all agree on is Greta. So let's hear some more from
yeah.
her.
You said you had no contact at all with any of your other colleagues from the boat when you were detained. Is that what you said?
No, that's not what I said. I was just mainly speaking. I don't really know what's going on because
You don't know what's going on with the others.
Are you worried
no,
about
I
the
wasn't
others?
able to say goodbye.
Are you worried about the others that they might be detained for
Yeah, I'm very worried about them. We heard many different messages um, pointing towards that they would not make it easy. And there were troubles with being able to see lawyers. I'm very much calling for their immediate release and calling for everyone who can to mobilize to their governments and other ways to demand their immediate release. And of course to demand not only humanitarian aid being let into Gaza, but also a ceasefire, but most importantly an end to the occupation and an end to the systemic oppression and violence that Palestinians are facing on an everyday basis.
Are you disappointed you didn't manage to break the blockade?
I'm I don't know if disappointed is the right word. This is a continued violation of international law and war crimes that Israel
Okay,
are
all right. You know what?
systematically
Okay,
committing.
okay. We know all the taglines. Jesus, I mean, come up with something semi-original. Yeah, they might also, they don't need to hire a PR agency because nobody's pushing back. But I mean, just come up with. I just finished last night watching Mad Men for the fifth time. The give me 50 taglines thing is, maybe they should do that as well. They have not enough of them and they keep repeating them. But more interestingly, like she's talking about concern for the other people on the boat. They were all basically allowed to leave. They chose not to. So it's funny, at first when you hear it, and then I don't know, it annoys me and disgusts me at the same time. Michael.
You know, when you go sometimes to past schools, at least in America, and it says drug-free zone, because somebody put up a sign probably 5, 10 years ago that said drug-free zone, which may or may not have been true then, but there's a sign up there. This and nobody stops to think, is it really true? And why are you saying it? And what's the enforcement? And this woman, first of all, her biggest complaint was she didn't get to say goodbye. The second point is she was coming after a military blockade in the middle of a war. That statement in of itself should have stopped. The whole interview should have stopped. Are you disappointed you didn't break the blockade? And what she didn't say is that I'm relieved that I didn't try to block it and they didn't blow me out of the water. Now, obviously, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran would have blown her out of the water. I mean, anybody would have. Hamas, if they thought she was a threat, Hezbollah, all the great people that she supports, the Houthis and so on, would have blown her out of the water. The second point is she's very worried about her friends that, of course, had the choice. The notion here is that if you're a bad person and you go and you punch a bully, not a bully, if you go and punch a teacher in your drug-free zone, the teacher's supposed to talk to you about that. Then you pull a knife out on the teacher and you threaten them with a knife, and the teacher's supposed to talk to you about that. You finally pull a gun out. And it is continuously this notion that no matter how bad you are, if you have an opinion, no matter how absurd it is, or how obviously anti-freedom or anti-civilization it is, it needs to be addressed, is crazy. That's where we have gotten to. She can say and do anything she wants, and it doesn't make any difference. And Israel needs to hire madmen, and they need to hire other people that can do this to handle it. It's absurd. It's just absurd.
By the way, Israel does at some point try to hire, but watch Mad Men. I'm not going
I
to
don't
spoil
think they
anything.
do. I don't think they have.
Uh, Thank you, Govin, for the super chat. Govin says, curious why YouTube allows a defamatory, like, and then there's a name, a Frankenstein lookalike to slander Jews constantly while talking gubs. Anyway, I didn't read the name because I don't know. Oh, okay, this is not a troll in the chat that you're referring to. It's somebody, John B. Unwells. Yeah, I don't know who that is, so I can't comment on that at all. I don't know if either of you know, and you can comment. But yeah, Stuart, Michael will be back in a couple of minutes.
Oh, okay. Um, I would just say as much as I dislike Greta, I think and not because she's a child, just in general, I think it's a mistake to attack someone's appearance. I you know I don't think she particularly looks like Frankenstein, but even if she did, that's not why she should be despised. It's her ideas that we need to attack, not in any way her appearance. Unless I misread that, but it sounded like he was.
Well, I think he's talking about whoever John B. Unwells is. Yeah, Daniel, do you want to jump in audio wise to tell us what we're talking about?
So I didn't find him on YouTube. He's some guy on Rumble. Looks generally people on Rumble are not what you would call like uh liking of the Jews. I'm maybe over generalizing, but usually people on Rumble are the people who were banned from more mainstream media.
Right.
I
Yeah.
also, sorry. I also wanted to say I don't actually believe that Greta is worried about her colleagues. I think the lie that all of these people are relying on the fact that Israel is a civilized country, that Israel is not an aggressor, that Israel does respect human rights. If she really believed deep down that they were these incredible villains, I just don't buy it. I think I think uh, the fact that she was willing to do this is because she knows deep down that Israel was not going to blow the boat out of the water. Israel was not going to harm her.
Yeah, and part of what they're relying on also, Michael, is that the news cycle is not, what it used to be where you sit at 8 p.m. and watch the news and then you maybe read it in the newspaper the next day and then you sit at 8 p.m. again. It's a social media news cycle where people, if you saw the posts on Sunday or whenever it was right before they were apprehended, it was things like people semi-serious or people who are taken seriously saying, "I'm worried about their lives. What is Israel going to do?" And of course they played into that, saying we were sprayed with something, and then there's the picture of them with their hands up as if they think somebody's gonna do something to them. So it was they played into it the whole time, and apparently even after being released, and just some of them not accepting the release, they're still trying to play into that because it doesn't matter any more than it matters that you say 14,000 Palestinian babies are about to die in the next 48 hours, then in 48 hours later, nobody remembers it, supposedly, or everybody pretends like they don't remember it. Michael.
Yeah, look, it. I think the thing that's most upsetting to me is we're trying to inform, in theory, you would like to inform policy in general to lead to, and I'm not trying to be Pollyannish here, to a better society. I mean, the people that are on the woke left and the left and so on always love to talk about how we're trying to get the little guys so that we can get everybody an equal opportunity to get better and have a normal life, and everybody just wants to be able to support their family and work and have and eat reasonably well and have shelter and blah blah blah. That's the touted righteous goal of all these people that are worried about all the underdogs as their first priority. And you got to ask yourself, what about the philosophy of these folks do they think is going to actually help achieve that? The news has completely lost sight of that. And I don't know that it ever really had sight of that, but there was the notion of the American way and the American dream and everything. And the idea that blowing stuff up or supporting terrorists who want to blow stuff up or terrorists who took billions upon billions of dollars in aid and built tunnels instead of building a society, a civilization, is just crazy. And everything that's happening with this kind of stuff is leading to this lust for anarchy and chaos and support for the dredges of society who have not only contributed nothing positive to society, but actually contributed only negative. You can ask yourself, what has Hamas ever done for the Palestinian people in the 20 years they've been in power? Are the Palestinian people today better off than they were 20 years ago before they received, what is it, $1 billion? I don't know how many billions that they've received. It's out there. And the answer is they've done nothing. What they have done is create a militarized zone. Sorry, go ahead, Stuart.
I'd say they've done a lot. It's just all negative.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they haven't done. If they've done nothing, that would have been great.
Right.
But no, they've done incredible amounts of destruction.
Exactly. And they have built one of the finest military tunnel complexes in the world. And they have basically starved, killed, maimed, held hostage it is an open air prison there. And it's run by Hamas. And
Yep.
that's what's going on. So I don't understand why, especially any Western-based news, and I'm including BBC here, CNN, MSNBC, Fox is on the other side of all this stuff, at least for this argument. Fox is busy making fun of Greta and everything, of course. Um, you know, why do they think that this is good and is going to end up being giving a better world to the people that they putatively support? And the answer is they all know better. The executives running these places all know better. And all they want to do is have ridiculous headlines. I used to call it the Wolf Blitzer, the world is ending. It used to be whenever you watch Wolf Blitzer, he would come up every day with some new way that the world was going to end. And that's what it's just a shame because these people should know better. They do know better, but they're interested in this soundbite kind of crap instead of any kind of how can we build a better we can, by the way, folks. We have the resources. The global countries that have actually created wealth and have created good things, mostly Western countries, even Japan, which behaves like a Western country, has created good things. China, the part of China that's westernized, has created good things. We have the means to affect positively the lives of people, including in these really bad areas. But as long as we keep supporting people like the Iranians and all of their henchmen, we're not going to end up with anything better. In fact, it's just going to continue to get worse, preferably with more and more people starving or being or being effectively, held hostage in their own places. The elites know all this, folks. They know it all. And yet they perpetuate this crap, people like Greta, who will never, there's not a single thing that I could find that she's done that's been positive.
Um, Yeah, well, she's given us material for shows. Thank you, Christian, for the super chat. Christian says, bullshit bingo with Greta today, but let's have a debate about ICE and Trump. I suggest Bosch Foston versus Michael Leibowitz. Make it happen. Uh, I will watch that debate if it happens. Parting thoughts, and where can people find you, Stuart?
As I mentioned, I do have a Substack. It's stuartmargolis.substack.com. I put out a new article at least once a week. Yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm also on Facebook, not on X.
And Michael, parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
Hoffman with 2 Fs on LinkedIn.
Well, I know where else people can find you, Michael. That's in Boston, July 1st, on stage when the Ayn Rand Center UK is doing the Daily Objective and the reality show in front of a live audience. Yeah, it's been a while since we've done that. And I actually, we've never done both shows I think so. So yeah, it's a first. Make sure you sign up. There's a link in the description. If you're gonna be in Boston July 1st, you should be there. Thanks guys for joining me. Thanks everybody for watching. We're back tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.